Newsologist. One world, many views. Yes, some of them. Liz Truss is now the new Prime Ministeress of the UK. And pretty quickly things will be focusing on one thing, and that's the price of energy. Truss is all Prime Ministers and all presidents and anybody who's in elected office will be thinking of one other thing, and that's the next election. The next election is due in the UK to come up in 2024, approximately 2 years from now. The last election, 2019, was fought on the hill of Brexit. Get Brexit done. Boris won that election because 2016 there had been a referendum. The referendum had narrowly but had got a majority to leave. The politicians prevaricated, walked around, kicked the can, basically did not want to do what they had been implicitly instructed by the populace to do, which was get out of Europe. You can argue the rights, the wrongs, you can argue whether it was good or bad. It does not make one iota difference. That's what the referendum was. That's what the British people desired. This next election will possibly be fought on, because it's impossible, 2 years' time. Who knows? There may be WW3 whizzing its way. There may be a huge conflict that's expanded in Eastern Europe. Who knows? But on the basis that it's still a localized contest between in the red corner the Ruskies, and in the white corner the Ukrainians, or sort of say the blue and yellow corner the Ukrainians. Who knows? The Americans definitely seem to want to continue. It is like a proxy match with the Ruskies. It depends. Things change. 2024 will be an election year in the United States. It's impossible to tell who are the contenders and who will or will not be running. It doesn't make any real difference if it's anybody from the normal Democrat Party or the normal Republican Party. They will be, or they look to be, a supporter of Ukraine. So if the Ruskies haven't won by that time, then the war will still be going on, or remnants of the war. The UK has an election in 2024. The effect of the war in Ukraine has been higher prices for Lecky. Truss, if she can sort 2 or 3 major things out, like the Lecky price, and put some sort of cap on it. There's various options. All of the options seem to involve more borrowing. That's not a big problem, because within 2 years I can rack up as much debt as I want, and I know that I do not have to pay it back within the 2 years. So if I don't borrow the money and give people in businesses handouts, free money, and that's either by putting some sort of price cap on your bills, or buying the energy direct and the government then reselling it on to the energy providers in the UK. Either way, it means the government having to stump up money. The government does not have any money. It's as simple as that. The government runs a permanent deficit. That deficit gets added on each year to the debt. The debt is north of £2 trillion. That's 2,000 billion or 2 million million. Lots of squids. It hasn't put the country into a tailspin so far, and another 100 billion or 200 billion or 300 billion in the next 2 years won't do that either. What it will do is it make it difficult for whoever is the Prime Minister or whichever party is in power after 2024. There's constant racking up of the debt. But these numbers which are bandied about, and when it comes down to it, those are the 2 basic options. Either it's a direct handout to the people, here you go, £400, £500, whatever, or a cap on how much a KWH or a BTH or a therm or whatever unit that they're measuring the Lecky or the gas in, and the government puts a cap on it, and the government pays the difference between the market rate and the capped rate. It involves the government borrowing money. Some people say, well, they can just tax the energy companies. Yeah, they can do. But even if they tax the energy companies, there's possibly still not enough money to pay for the handouts. For each billion, and a billion's 1,000 million, or a million thousands, for each £1 billion that the government borrows, that's basically, if you take the billion divided by 69 million population approximately of the UK, maybe that's a bit more, I think it's about 65, it's due to go up to 69 in the next 10 years. It's approximately £15 per person that the government would be borrowing on their behalf. So if you say half the people in the country aren't working and paying anything much in, if you divide the country up into 4 blocks, 0, 20, 20, 40, 40, 60, 60, 80, you cannot realistically say that people 0, 20 and the bulk of the people 60 upwards are not contributing much. There will be exceptions, but on the whole, just like on the whole, most people between 20 and 60 are working. Will there be exceptions where people are unemployed? Yes. People that can't work? Yes. For discussion purposes, though, £15 per person, half the people are not paying into the tax system, whether that be VAT, NIC, PAYE, any of the other myriad of taxes. So that's basically £30 per person that the government will borrow, per billion, of course. So if the government borrows 10 billion, then the government will borrow £300 per person. If the government borrows 100 billion, that's £3,000 per working person. And you go, £3,000 on top of what we're already paying. You go, hang on a minute, this is never going to get paid off. The thing that you've got to realise is this debt will never be paid off. It'll just get hied into the national debt, and the national debt will just click up a few points. How are you going to finance the £3,000 per head? Well, that's simple enough. The government sells some government securities, gilts. If it can't sell them on the open market, just gets the Bank of England to buy them, and the Bank of England buys them off the open market. De facto, it's the government buying its own debt. So that would be, we'll assume that we're borrowing 100 billion. Yeah, just another 100 billion, of course, and so that would be £3,000 per working head. So if we assume a reasonable rate of 3%, wow, that's pretty good. So that's £90 a year. I would just do some broad brush stuff. Well, that's an extra 90 divided by 52 weeks, call it £2. So the government has got to increase taxes on the working people by £2 per week to finance this debt, extra debt of 100 billion. So there you go, problem solved, jobs are good. And Truss, along with most prime ministers, will go for the bigger number because it doesn't make any difference. Here's how the game works. If you borrow a load of money and you win the next election, inflation will have eroded, taken the amount of money that you've borrowed down to a certain amount. Sorry. If you're the Prime Minister and you just borrow small and it has no real effect, then you're out, or you stand a higher percentage chance of being booted out. So why not just go for broke? Borrow 100 billion, borrow 200 billion, but just keep borrowing. The only sort of ceiling on the borrowing is the appetite for the debt markets to accept more debt. The problem is when you over-egg the debt, and there's plenty of countries that you can go and take a look at where that's happened. South American countries tend to stand out. Some of the former British colonies have had a little bit of a play in the casino of hyperinflating their currencies. The problem is the currency. If you want to put too much debt into the system and the people that buy it don't think that you're able to pay it back in a currency that has some value, fine, you can pay it back with hyperinflated pounds, but if the hyperinflated pounds don't buy anything, then why would you buy the debt? And that's the exchange rate. The pound's been getting a bit of a bashing, as has had the euro in recent weeks. The dollar is, the prettiest, ugliest girl at the dance, or the prettiest, ugliest boy at the dance. Whichever way it is, you've got to be recognise that if you over-egg and borrow too much money too quickly, that it depresses the value of your currency vis-a-vis other currencies in the world, primarily the dollar, which is the currency used for trading in most commodities, and most international debt is denominated in USDs. So you Liz Truss, you're the Prime Minister, you get in 50 billion, 60 billion, just put all your money on red or all your money on black. Go big or go home at the next election. The problem that she'll have will be, will it work? What happens if the energy prices go astronomical and the 100 billion has to get expanded to 200 billion or 300 billion? That's a possibility, but it's also a risk. The risk that she'll take is not borrowing the money. If you don't borrow the money, you've got nowhere to go but austerity. Nobody likes austerity. No. We want more. We want free stuff. Everybody wants free stuff. Free food banks, free this, free that. People want free energy. That'll be the next thing. Free broadband, and free energy. Why should people pay any money for their lecky bills? Why not we'll keep borrowing money and we'll pay it off in the taxes? Just basically, fundamentally, people are saying that energy should be cheap. If it's not cheap, there's mega problem. So Liz Truss, borrow big, or you might be going home in 2 years' time. You may be going home in 2 years' time, no matter what happens, even if she pulls the thing around, even if she does a good job. There's a head of steam for a change in government. The Conservatives will have been in government for 14 years and there's a reasonable chance that Labour will be put back in. So if Labour's put back in and she's borrowed 100 billion or 200 billion, ain't her problem anymore. Somebody else will have to sort it out. If she's borrowed 200 billion or wherever and she gets to be Prime Minister, then she's got 5 years to fiddle about and try and get it sorted out. Our only concern realistically should be is how do I get elected at the next election? A number one thing's going to be the energy, and then obviously if she gets that sorted out, you've got the NHS, which is just rolls along forever. And when people can't think of anything else, they'll just bring up the NHS and it'll be, there's 1 million people or 2 million or 5 million or 10 million, however millions of people waiting for. Will that get sorted out? On past performances, no. Will things like immigration get sorted out? No. Will this thing with Brexit and the island and Northern Ireland and all this caper get sorted out? I honestly don't envisage that being resolved. That will just drag along. Basically nothing will change. That's my view. Things will just drag along. But it's who's sitting in the driving seat, who's in the PM seat. That's the only difference. If Labour get in and Stormer's still the czar of the Labour Party, will they make a better or a worse job of it? They'll be faced with exactly the same problems. They'll possibly apply some of their ideology, which basically means tax companies more, tax anybody more. You can only tax people that have got money and borrow more. It's not going to be too different to what Liz Truss is doing, apart from Liz Truss is saying that she's going to reduce taxes. It's going to make it more difficult for her because she's going to reduce taxes, because that's money that has ended up on one side of your budget that you're now taking out of that side of the budget and you're putting it onto the other side of the budget, and the other side of the budget is borrowing. So if you give a 50 billion pounds reduction in taxes, you've got to find that 50 billion either from savings, austerity ain't going to happen, or increased borrowing. Let's borrow more. The borrowing, basically, the bulk of the borrowing is the government borrowing from itself via this convoluted government selling bonds to the market, then the Bank of England going, I think I'll just buy this. That government bond looks really good. The Treasury and the Bank of England, they might as well just get the wheelbarrow and just wheel the gilt from the Treasury to the Bank of England and, wheel the confetti money back from the Bank of England rather than this laborious ploy. But after having said that, if you're a banker, it's a pretty good laborious ploy. It means the bankers can make money on it. Of course they can. They buy the gilt off the government and then they sell the gilt at a profit to the Bank of England. Here presto, the banks have made money. The Bank of England has no money. The Bank of England just magics up money. It just makes it out of thin air or thick air or whatever air it can get its hands on. The Bank of England just presses a few buttons and creates a few squids. The only real thing in the shell game is the people in the country that have to work or pay an element of their pay or investment income or capital gains or wherever on the VAT or wherever. Yeah, that's the only real thing in this whole sham. The sham is the banks making the money. The banks don't want this. No, the banks don't want the Treasury to and the Bank of England to collude and just buy it. The banks want the government. The banks love the government getting into more debt. More debt, more gilts, more profit, more gilts sold to the Bank of England. Here, presto, that'll be another Porsche Cayenne in my garage with the bonus for that. Yeah, no problem. So Liz Truss is going to spend. It's going to be like that Viv Richardson from the 1960s. Spend. But she's going to deliver by borrowing. Just like that nice Mr. Blair did. He said education. And what did you get? Or what did we get? We've got a war in Bosnia and Serbia. We've got a war in Iraq, and we've got a war in Afghanistan. So when he meant education, this was obviously a code word that we weren't aware of at the time, which meant war. Or we're going to educate them Bosnians, we're going to educate them Iraqis, and we're going to educate them Afghanis. And as we all know, that was the reason why we went into Afghanistan, was so the little lasses in Afghanistan could go to school. And if you believe that, you believe Tony Blair was a nice young man. So Liz Truss going to be deliver. It's going to be like Amazon. It's going to be like trucks on every road in the country delivering that cheaper lecky. You're going to get your cheaper lecky, the Liz Truss delivery system. And the trucks, once they've delivered the free lecky, they're going to be going to the Treasury to pick up the gilts and deliver them to the Bank of England, so the Bank of England can buy. Time to put the kettle on.